In this video, I'm going to show you how you can use the pipe welds report that I created that has a live link to the ShipConstructor database to automatically have some interactive reports using PowerPivot. So as I mentioned in my blog post, I am using PowerPivot mainly because it gives me an interactive report rather than just a static report, which you'll see shortly. So what happens when you first open up this file, if you have PowerPivot enabled, you will get the screen that you see here. If you don't have PowerPivot enabled, it will ask you to enable it if you have Office 2013. If you have an older one, you should follow the instructions on my blog to download the plugin. So the first thing that comes up that you'll have to do is to enable this content. And the reason being is because there is a SQL connection to the ShipConstructor project. You're just pretty much saying that you know that there's a connection and you want to enable it. However, nothing's really going to change for you because it's connected to my project, which obviously you do not have access to it. So the very first thing to do is to connect this Excel file to the project that you're actually using. So to do that, first you go to the PowerPivot tab and you go to Manage. So what this does is it brings up a whole new dialog, which you start managing your data, which you can click around here and see the data that I've actually imported. Actually not imported, but it has a direct link to my project. So to associate it with your project, what you have to do is hit this existing connections. This will be the connection that I'm using, which is connected to my project, which you will want to edit. And this is where you just change your server name, where your project's located, as well as the database name to where you want your ShipConstructor database to be. So I don't have to change anything there, but just to make sure that everything's okay, I would make sure you do test connection and see everything's valid before you continue. So I'm going to cancel this and close this. So this, depending how many welds or how many pipe welds you have in your project, will depend how long it takes to load. It can take anywhere from 10 seconds to something that's relatively big could take about a minute to 2 minutes. So in this view, which you don't really ever have to deal with, if you connect to your project, this will just automatically be updated, so there's absolutely no editing that has to happen here. But just to kind of give you some context of the information that you have, is the information that I pull is coming from these tables here, and then these little bit darker gray fields here are my calculated fields, which again automatically gets calculated with the values that come from the information right from the project. So there's no changes that have to happen, these automatically get created. So if you go back to the original Excel sheet, once you connect to your project, it's going to say that the data model's changed, and if you want to refresh the data. So again, depending on the amount of welds, you would have a different view here and how long it would take. So in here I have three main tabs that give you a good idea of the type of information you can collect. It's a little different than my blog post, mainly because I have to use a project that obviously I can share the data with the pictures on the blogs. I can't share the raw data. So when I'm talking about interactive reports, what you can kind of see is that for the type of welds, for example, if I click on shop welds, what happens is you can see that it filtered down all the controls or the components to be the shop weld. So now this just gives me the information for the shop welds, and this actually got changed to only show me the shop welds. If I want to see just the field welds, I just click on field welds and it changes the interaction. So probably a better one to show you here is this weld distribution. So this is how many welds I have per meter for my whole unit. So this is my unit 1, my unit 2, and then the connection between unit 1 and unit 2. And this is the type of weld, so if it's going to be a field weld or a shop weld. So if I select my unit 2, it gives you a ratio of how many of them are field welds and how many are shop welds. If I select my unit 1, it changes it graphically of these components. So there's different ways you can filter if you're not very familiar with PowerPivot, but I'll just give you a little bit of context of how you can actually use it. There's filtering the way that I have here, the interactive filtering, but you can also add information here to filter. So when you see here on the Power View fields, if you click all, these are all the tables that I was showing you before that was being imported. The main one that you'll have to use is just connections. That's where I just put all the information. But say for example, if I grab unit and I drag unit to the filters here, if I only want to see unit 1, I can check unit 1, and now it just provides me information for unit 1. So there's two types of filtering: the interactive filtering that you can do by selecting in here, as well as the normal pivot tables, if you're familiar with that, filtering it through here. And again, there's a lot of other graphical stuff that you can do here. So to use any of this stuff, what you can do is that all you have to do is simply drag. If I want my units here and I want my welds, so it gives me the weld lengths per unit, and by changing the type, so for example if I wanted a column chart, I can select it and it automatically changes the graph that I actually have. So it kind of gives you a little bit more information. And then I can even add types of welds into my verticals, and it kind of breaks it up. There's a lot of different ways you can actually break that information into, and it would display it differently. So this is a little bit better. And one last thing I want to mention is the ShipConstructor project. Is the way that we get welds is that you have to go to your catalog and to your pipe catalog stocks. You have to open up connections, and the way that it gets information of what connections are actually going to be welded is that you have to go to the pipe link component type and change the connection to be welded. So there's a couple options that you have here, which is none, which is the default, gap, and welded. So the data that gets linked from the Excel file only looks at the weld pipe link component type. So if you are connecting to a project that has none of these set, you most likely, or you will get no connections. So I hope that kind of gives you a rough idea of how to use this report, how to connect it to your project, and start playing with Power Pivots and Power View as very interactive type of reports. And once you have it linked, pretty much all you would have to do is open up the file, go to data, or sorry, Power Pivot, go back to your data, and click on refresh. Once you refresh it, it'll pull the live information and all your views would automatically be updated. Hope that helps.